This video is intended for anybody who's looking to purchase a Seville. Anybody who's thinking about buying a Seville, this video is a must-see if you're looking to purchase one, because I'm going to go over some of the features that you need to look out for, or some of the things you need to look out for when you're looking at Sevilles, or some couple of things. It's going to be about a 10-minute long video maybe, so just bear with me and I'm going to go through everything very quickly. First, I'm going to start off with the interior. Nothing too major in the interior here, to be honest with you. I'm going to say the first thing to look out for really is those Bose speakers. If you have a car with a Bose system, and the best way to tell is to look on the head unit, it'll say Bose. Those speakers are very expensive to replace. One is about $100. These bottom door speakers here. So look out for the speakers being blown. You can tell the speaker's blown. You'll hear a muffled sound from them. You know, usually they're $100 to buy from a dealership, and then another $30 to install. So another $140 per door, compared to maybe $150 for 4 speakers for a normal car. Dash pads, they warp. It's not an issue really, but it's something to look out for if you're a perfectionist. They warp. Mine's been re-glued a couple of times, but then again, you know, it still warps a little bit. Look out for that. Another thing to look out for, broken latches. I've got a broken latch right here. It broke off a couple years ago, and I just never bothered to, you know, get it repaired because it's the whole piece. Look out for that. Another thing to look out for, these little knobs right here on the rear air seat controls. They tend to fall off. Not a big deal, then again, just something else to look at when you're looking for a Seville. So now we're going to go outside of the Seville, and we're going to pop the hood, and we're going to tell you another thing to look out for. Another big thing to look out for on the Seville is the North Star motor. Now, if you'd watched my other video, I gave you a little bit of detail about maybe the head gaskets, but it's actually a lot more complex than that. Besides the head gaskets, you have to do something called time start the block, which means the bolt holes in the block separate, causing the coolant to enter the cylinders. Now, this is about a $3,000 repair job from an independent shop. Can be up to $5,000 if you actually take it to a dealership, so look out for that. Another thing to look out for is the water crossover on the 2000 plus models. They leak coolant. That is not cheap. You have to drop the motor. Another couple things to look out for, oil leaks are common, but you can actually live with that. You can just add oil to it. These motors by design use oil. You're probably going to use oil about 1 quart every 2,000 miles if you're lucky. Mine uses a quart every maybe 1,500 miles. Again, not a big deal. Just add oil to it. Look out for these coil cassettes right here. As they get older, they can arc. They can get water intrusion. They're about $200 a piece for each side, including the spark plugs. You got the spark plugs, another 50 bucks. Watch out for coolant leaks. Not really a huge issue on these cars, but again, something to look out for. You never know if you're going to have a coolant issue. Let's see. I think under the hood we're pretty good. I think I mainly got most of the points. If you do some research on the internet, you'll find a lot more. But for the most part, the engine, other than those things I've listed, is pretty durable. Vacuum leaks are common. Around the intake plenum, that's another thing. The intake plenum is this part right here. If you point to it, and actually, excuse me, no, it's not. I lied. It's right here. Right here, and it develops a crack. It's a piece of rubber, and after about 5 to 10 years, it develops a crack, causes a vacuum leak. You'll throw codes, you'll have poor idle, rough idle, all that wonderful stuff. So now we're going to go to this is a very common Seville issue, especially on the 98 models, 98 2004 models. Let me grab my. One of the first things I tell people to do when looking for Seville is check the trunk. The trunk on these cars is known to leak. Very common. It is a very well documented and common issue. If you're one of those people who owned a Seville that never had a trunk leak, well, guess what? You're lucky, because I would say about 95% of the Sevilles I've come across have had a trunk leak. Now, the best way to look for this is, of course, you're looking at the trunk here. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, that's because it's not in the trunk. It's under this little spare tire well here. So you're going to lift this tire up, and you're going to feel the mat down here for water. Now, it's rained about every day in New Bern, Greenville, North Carolina for the last week. My trunk is dry as a bone, and that's the way it should be. Now, the easiest way to check for this issue, first thing I checked on my particular car was this rubber molding right here. General Motors actually redesigned the molding a couple years ago. That actually fixed this issue. Moldings, at least. molding's about $50, $60 for the dealership. Installation is nothing. All you need is some really good glue to fix this issue. They leak around the latch right here. Water comes in around the latch through the rubber molding, and it causes it to leak. Look out for these pieces behind the window. These are common. I re-glued mine a couple times to, you know, make sure it didn't have any more issues with it. Again, very common right through here as well. When you actually screw it back down, those 4 screws back here, just add some epoxy to it or some kind of really good glue. That will pretty much solve the issue with the trunk. Most people will tell you that it's the gasket. Actually, it's not the gasket. It's actually the usually the moldings or the piece around the window. The gasket is usually the last thing it really is. Another thing to look out for: third brake lights. They take on water as well. This one's from a different Seville. I had to replace it one time before because the last one I had, it was actually taking in lots of water. So watch out for that. The best way to tell if it's the newer model, in 2001 they released a newer version of this. The best way to tell, look at the badge here. If it's this old badge with the little ducts, little merlettes right here, then you have the old design. That design takes on water. The new design is the new Cadillac logo with the colored shields. That's the design to look for. I actually ordered the right one off eBay with the colored shields, and they sent me this one for some reason. But luckily, it's not been taking on any water, and it lights up, and it does its job. So, you know, honestly, I can't complain with the way it is. Other than that, really, and the last thing, this is a big one, and I can't believe I forgot to mention this. These suspensions are electronic. And you can't tell right now because it looks fine, but this car's sitting about a half an inch lower than it did when I bought it. That's because over time, these air shocks, they actually start to lose their air. Now, you can't see because it's light outside. Well, maybe you can. There's that electronic suspension right there. These start to leak. This is rubber, and after a time, these pieces here start to leak air. Start to cause your car to sit down. Like, if you've ever seen a Seville go down the road, and if you ever noticed that it, suspension was a little bit low, well, that's because it had an air leak right here. Now, if you buy an SLS, if you're looking at an SLS from 2001 on, you're fine. You don't have to worry about the suspension. They use a normal shock and strut suspension system like every other passenger car in the world. So you're out the clear. If you're looking at a 98 to 2000 Seville SLS, you're looking at an STS any year from 98 to 2003. Watch out for suspension issues. Now, I got to break this up into 2 separates because the 98 to 2002s had the electronic CVRSS suspension. The 2002.5 to 2003 STSs had the MagnaRide. I can't comment personally on the MagnaRide. I've never owned a MagnaRide car, and I've never been in a MagnaRide car long enough. But I can tell you that these CVRSS suspensions are not cheap to fix. One strut is about $700 average from a General Motors dealership. Now, you can bypass this system in this car. And by bypass, I mean you can buy a normal suspension setup from anywhere that sells Cadillac parts. Buy a normal suspension system and easily put a resistor into the plug that plugs where the electronic suspension goes into, and have yourself a car that rides and drives fine, but you're going to lose the characteristics of a Seville. The reason why the Sevilles ride so good is because of that suspension system. So if you're looking at a Seville and it has a CVRSS and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to replace it with the normal suspension setup, think again. You need to look out for that. You need to make sure when buying, you realize that when you do that, you're basically, handicapping the car. But if you're one of those people who wants to buy a Seville, look out for the suspension. I would check how it handles, how it drives. If it's got a lot of clunking, if it has a lot of, lots of noise coming from the front end, the suspensions would be my first culprit. And I would budget about $3,000 to $4,000 to do the whole suspension. You can order parts offline from many places that are so much cheaper for the suspensions, and then you can have it installed. And then, $3,000 to $4,000 should be enough to overhaul the whole suspension. Bushings, tie rods, control arms, ball joints, anything like that that would need to be replaced on a 100,000 mile car. That should be enough. And once you do that, you're going to have a Seville that pretty much rides and drives like it would when it rolled off the showroom floor. So I recommend, if you're going to do that, that you look and price carefully. Do not buy the shocks and struts from a General Motors dealership unless you have a hookup there. I have seen them on Amazon for as low as $460 for one, compared to $700 or $800 at the dealership for one. So you can save yourself a big chunk of change if you just order it off the internet and have the dealership install it like I do. But other than that, these cars are they're pretty good, you know. Just look out for what I've told you. Another thing to look out for is electronic ignitions. These keyless, ignition switches here. 90,000 miles is about the average lifespan. I replaced this one at 60,000. It didn't need to be replaced. I did it anyway, and never know when something's going to happen. That's the big thing to look out for, is these keys. If you start having issues with the car not starting, the car is starting, but you're having a lot of codes and they go away after certain miles. I've seen a lot of issues on the internet related to this keyless entry, this ignition switch right here. You would be shocked at how many issues a messed up electronic ignition switch can cause you. Excuse me. Other than that, they're pretty good cars. I'm not gonna lie. Do your research though. This video was a little bit of information about them. You can get much more information on the Cadillac forums. Just search Cadillac forums, Google, Yahoo, whichever search provider you do. You're going to find that forum one of the most valuable things you've ever used. It really is. That's the reason why I know so much about these cars, is because I did my research about a year before I bought this one. And I knew what I was getting myself into when I bought it. And I also worked at the Cadillac dealership. So I got to see firsthand what these cars can be. And honestly, the forum really helped me save thousands of dollars, because if I hadn't been on that forum, I would have spent lots of money on other things, doing, you know, fixing things that weren't actually broken. So I appreciate you watching this video. If you like this, please, you know, like my video. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them to me. I will be more than happy to answer them for you. I've been getting good responses so far on my review videos for the Bose system and for the car itself. So I really appreciate it, guys, and I will see you next time.